Amelia Schaffner, and I am the Director of Entrepreneurship at the Goizueta Business School. And I'm here with...
Hey, I'm Brian Goebel. I'm the Managing Director of Social Enterprise at Goizueta, and it is one of 3 of our research centers at the business school focused on making markets work for more people in more places in more ways. And I also oversee a really cool accelerator program called Start Microenterprise. I get to work with a lot of small businesses across our Atlanta community. So excited to join you all today.
Exactly. And Brian and I work very closely with entrepreneurs and small businesses. And today our discussion is going to be focusing on resilience for entrepreneurs during COVID. Given both of our backgrounds and obviously our passions for supporting entrepreneurs and small businesses and startups in particular, we want to talk a little bit about resilience today. So what is resilience and how are entrepreneurs practicing it in today's sort of uncertain times? And we will also talk a little bit about ways that all of us, anybody that's on the call and other people in the community, can help small business owners and startup founders be more resilient. So like things like how we shop, how we can lend skills, how we can leverage our companies and more. And Brian's going to walk us through the structure of today's conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Amelia. I mean, we're going to keep it pretty practical and tactical and obviously really relevant and focused on COVID-19 and the impact that it's created across our business community, but also across our neighborhoods and broader society as well. So we're going to start off with a few kind of stats and facts of how COVID-19 has already significantly impacted the business kind of landscape, particularly for startups and small businesses. And we're going to talk for those entrepreneurs and small business owners that are joining us today, going to talk a little bit about what are some kind of techniques and tactics? What are 5 things they really need to be thinking about and doing as they look at sustaining and continuing forward beyond COVID-19? And like Amelia said, we really want to share some tools, tips, strategies for all of us. It takes a village, entrepreneurship, to team sport. What are some things that we can do to really help one another? So that'll be our structure. We're going to talk for about the next 10 minutes and cover those topics in depth with some great examples as well from entrepreneurs and startups that we're seeing around town, and then spend the remainder of our time together looking at our chat and answering as many questions and having a great dialogue today. So with that, love to turn it back to you, Amelia, to talk a little bit about stats and facts. I know COVID-19 really hit us here in Georgia about mid-March. Yeah. But I know the impacts, even though it's only been a few weeks, have been pretty significant economically for our startup and small business community. So tell us a little bit about what we're seeing so far across the country and right here in the ATL.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been staggering, after so many long streaks of high growth and, very low unemployment rates. For the first time, we're starting to see lower, a lot of unemployment happening. I mean, some of the data that the economists are predicting is pretty scary, if you will, in some ways. So I'm sure many of you are feeling that. I mean, they're talking about 10+% unemployment rate by in the future. But also what is most staggering is that most of these job losses are really deriving from small businesses and startups. And one of the things that, they found, the Startup Genome did a piece of research, and they looked at, we have about 40% of the startups have 3 or less months in runway. And many of the startups, 3 to 4, have experienced very slow revenue growth. Those that had term sheets have seen a slowing of the terms and of the considerability from investors and so forth. And so, Brian, I know you also take a closer look usually at micro businesses. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more how they are also being impacted. So those are the smaller.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, small businesses cover a lot of ground. I know the SBA talks about small businesses, any business under 500 employees. For us and some of those small businesses that you referenced, we call those real small businesses. Those are the majority of businesses, in fact, in America. And micro business is an area that we really focus on with our Start Microenterprise Accelerator program. And those are businesses with 4 or less employees that typically take about 50,000 or less to get started. And so those are, a lot of our restaurants, a lot of our artists and makers, a lot of those businesses that we rely on every day, that our friends and family and neighbors work at as well. So our Start Me program, since 2013, we've helped those kind of small businesses start and grow, and we've had about 300 of them that we've served. So we've looked at our own data set. We've gone out and surveyed our entrepreneur community at Start Me, and those are across different communities here in the Atlanta area, and significant impacts, very similar to what you said in the startup side for these small businesses. So 70% of them have decreased their hours dramatically or have had to shut down. 76% or so have seen pretty dramatic revenue losses in sales. And then many folks, in fact, over 70% and rising, really feel they're going to need some emergency kind of capital to help sustain and get them through this. So the impacts are very real. And like you said, cash is a big part of this, and how much cash you can have and how long that will last as a runway perspective. And it's even shorter for most small businesses. JP Morgan Institute, a research side of their bank, actually pre-COVID looked at small businesses, those that are really on that smaller employee side. And 50% of small businesses in America, and those are the ones that were like those 20 or less employees, 50% of those only have 15 days or less of cash available. So obviously this countdown is on and real. So that's why we really want to talk about resilience, talk about some of the resource programs and emergency needs to keep our businesses ongoing and thriving in the future. So the impacts are really real, but I do want us to not forget about opportunity. I think 2008, 9, 10 really taught us a lot. And so entrepreneurs and resilient people see opportunity as well. So tell us a little bit about some of those opportunities and lessons learned from maybe 08, 09.
Yeah, I know. And it's interesting because entrepreneurship seems to be one of those things that usually gets hit really hard at the beginning of our session. But what happens is, and because we're talking about resiliency, you see a surge immediately after that. After the 2008 crisis, it's been interesting because if you look at the number of startups that were generated from before the crisis in 2000 and in 2007, they were 1,200 startups started. But Crunchbase did a study over every year how many new startups start. And by the time we hit 2018, we were at 5,800. So really, it was one of the biggest financial growth eras we've had has been actually after the 2008 crisis. And I know you have some thoughts about how small businesses in the same period, Brian.
Yeah, it's just, American Express has done some really good research in this space as well for small businesses. So 2007 to 2018, obviously, a lot of growth in the U.S. economy, and particularly one of the fastest growing segments of small business ownership and entrepreneurship is actually women and women of color. And so if you look at that kind of period, there was a lot of small business growth, but particularly in that kind of set of entrepreneurs, which is really, really important to our community and our society as a whole. So kind of seeing that surge was really promising, but also something for us to really be thoughtful about as we look to rally and find support and help entrepreneurs be resilient. We're really focusing on those entrepreneurs of color and women as well to help us kind of continue that positive momentum we built. But obviously in 08, 09, that created some new opportunities for folks as they pivoted and switched from jobs and traditional kind of W-2s to starting their own businesses. So we're hopeful, and we're seeing a lot of entrepreneurs talk about pivot, talk about resilience as they rethink their strategies to move forward. So I do think similar things will happen. Obviously, COVID is different than the financial crisis, but we can kind of learn a lot and apply those lessons to move forward successfully.
Yeah, and Brian, I mean, one of the most important things is to know that these small businesses and startups really make up, and high growth startups really make up, 50% of the new jobs created. So this is the vital, part of our economy. Not only are they creating new jobs, but they're also customers to larger organizations. So they are really, truly, the core engine of our economy. They're also creating jobs, not only in general, but also in different locations and really spurring economy in their own industry. So it is kind of all of our responsibility to help and support them a little bit more. And you know, I know we talk about a little bit about resilience, and that's really the topic here. The word really comes from the Latin to go up again, risalire, so it just means to rebound. That's one of the things that we look at, but many times, you know, people are talking about larger corporations and how do they rebound, but here we're talking about small businesses. So the topic is much more personal. These are pains that are really felt at a very individual level. Small companies and startups really feel that pain from an individual person standpoint. HBR did an article not too far back that was talking about what are those characteristics, you know, for the resilient individual and corporations. And really they kind of found three main characteristics that all kind of need to be fulfilled for that point. They looked at how, you know, everybody needs to have a staunch acceptance of reality. That's one of them. How you need to have strong held values of a meaningfulness, right? And then the third one is sort of an uncanny ability to improvise. And so the reality is, if there isn't all three of these sort of chemical elements working together, it's kind of hard to move forward with that. So resilience, you know, in terms of how we think about it, it's also a cumulative element. So it's kind of a reservoir. And as individuals and as companies, it empties and it kind of refills. And so we really need to be continuously replenishing all of that. So Brian, I know you and I had a conversation about what were some of the things that, you know, small businesses and owners of startups should do to think about the situation and how they can face resilience.
Yeah, and I think resilience is obviously a word that's top of mind for many folks, and I think entrepreneurs, you know, and many that I meet, whether, you know, the resilience kind of comes up in the word of a crisis in today's world, but if you think of it, our entrepreneurs are very resilient, resourceful people. I think that's something that they take pride in, because a lot of things they do are a higher risk, right? As you're setting out on your own pathway. They may not have a lot of like formal employees on their team, but they're very kind of resilient and resourceful and filling that reservoir with friends and family and advisors and others. So I do think the entrepreneurs that we get to work with, you know, get resilience, and at this point are really kind of building that strength and really, you know, tapping into lots of different kind of networks and resources at this point to really continue that resilience and keeping that reservoir on full. So I know we wanted to kind of talk about it. We had a fun time kind of whiteboarding virtually yesterday. You know, what are 5 things when you think about resilience and a resilient strategy that small business owners and startup founders should be doing right now? And so I'd love to jump in there. And one of the things that I kind of circled first was, you know, do right. So you need to prioritize your people and safety at this point. Obviously, we all have a really important role to play in this public health response. And the sooner the curve is flattened, you know, the sooner that business and community activities can get back to more normal. So we all have a, you know, a critical role in this, and, you know, it's beyond corporate social responsibility. It's really, you know, an imperative for all of us. So from a resilience standpoint, it kind of all starts there. So reflecting on it, kind of that mentality in your policies, your operations, and a lot of businesses I've been working with have fully kind of revisited all of that, including, you know, their personnel and personal protective gear for those businesses that are still operating. Make sure they protect their staff, but also protect their customers. The other thing too is, you know, making sure if you've had to furlough employees, it's really important that you're doing that right. So not only the communication and the trust building and understanding and flexibility, but in the state of Georgia, you as an employer play a really, really critical role of setting people up into the unemployment system, including all those weekly certifications. So that's a huge responsibility, and one that our small business owners and startups are not taking lightly. Then lastly, communication, right? That's a big part of doing right. There's so much uncertainty and things changing, but just being open and honest with all of your key kind of customers, your employees, and even some of those folks that maybe your investors, your bankers, your landlords. It's really important to kind of do right, and doing right is just open and honest lines of communication. So kind of all starts from a resilient point of view for a lot of the businesses we work with, and that whole kind of doing right and making sure you're prioritizing people and safety. So I know another element that we talked about, Amelia, was kind of like those business pieces and digging deep and analyzing kind of your core business ops and finance. So tell us a little bit about that and some of the things that startups and small businesses should be really thinking about on that side. Yeah, I think you might be muted there.
Muted me. Oh, okay, great. Sorry. I think one of the things that, apologies for that delay. One of the things that I kept thinking about was, how from a small business standpoint, startup standpoint, one of the things to do is really dig deep. So rolling your sleeves up, right? And really trying to get to the core of understanding what your costs are, your revenue situation, and really performing, a strong cash flow analysis. One of the things that you might be used to is doing a quarterly analysis. Obviously, today, maybe it's better to go to a monthly and potentially even to a week-to-week analysis of the costs, the revenues, the cash flow, etc. There are a lot of tools out there, as some of you might have found out, SBDC, the SBA score website that have templates and things that might be able to help. And one of the things to do is really to try to question all the assumptions. It is very likely that your business is not going to operate as usual. And that kind of reality, unfortunately, needs to set in. We talked, it's a bit of a stoic perspective, if you will, sort of accepting the things that we cannot change, and really trying to take a look at what we can actually indeed control. One of the things we can do is obviously taking a look at what are our funding gaps, because as we mentioned before, Brian, is we're most likely, if we were looking to get funding, we will most likely not be able to get the full amount, if any at all. So to truly take a look at, what is available out there. There are some resources, and Brian and I will probably share some of these, after the call. Brian.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and I think, digging into those financials is really key. I know we've been working really closely with a lot of entrepreneurs just on the cash flow analysis, right? How much cash, what things can you renegotiate? What are some things you can cut out for now? Whether it's leases or other kind of supplier relationships, things like that. So after you do that deep dive, I know the next thing we could really see really resourceful and resilient entrepreneurs doing right now is seeking support, right? I think there's kind of this mythology around entrepreneurship that you work really hard in isolation, and you're kind of your own kind of rock that you lean on. But we know entrepreneurship's really about ecosystems. It's really about knowledge, networks, and capital coming together. And the best entrepreneurs and the most successful typically collaborate. And even if they're running their own company, they're part of broader kind of sets of ecosystem and supports and networks. So we're really counseling and seeing a lot of the most resourceful, resilient entrepreneurs and small business owners really seeking out that knowledge, networks, and capital. So of course, from a capital perspective, I think there's a lot of buzz around the federal aid programs, really targeting, supporting startups and small businesses. And those are through the Payroll Protection Program, the PPP, which the SBA is rolling out through local banks and now community banks and other CDFI partners locally. So a second round of that is already underway, and likely we'll run out of dollars, but we're really thinking more is on the way. And then obviously the SBA and the EIDL program is an opportunity for some lower interest, longer term capital, but also some grant dollars as well. So capital is really important to think about, but also kind of think about all those kind of people connections, right? That knowledge and networks and how you can build on. So when we're seeing a lot of our entrepreneurs that are doing a really good job and getting creative and pivoting, they're seeking out mentors, right? They're forming boards of advisors. It could be formal groups or those that they're, are leaning upon. We often call it your 3 a.m. who's on your 3 a.m. list? If something happens in the middle of the night or you're up at night worrying about it, who could you call? So kind of get your 3 a.m. list together. It could be people you've worked with in the past. It could be people that you rely on in new ways. And oftentimes those are peer groups. Some of the things that our entrepreneurs have been telling us is experts are great, and lawyers and attorneys and accountants, but being there and having someone that's kind of walking in the same shoes as you is really important. So kind of surround yourself with other resourceful, resilient entrepreneurs. There's a lot of great book groups on Facebook that are popping up regionally and nationally for people to share also what's going well, what's not working. And then I think partnership and bartering is a huge thing to kind of think about. Amelia, you mentioned there's some corporate partnerships that we all can be a part of as a common ecosystem. But there's also great folks in the startup community that are really good at digital marketing and websites. And they might need some help that your small business or startup could. So there's a lot of, I think, interesting arrangements and collaborations coming up in kind of the bartering place. And I'm noticing bartering groups on a neighborhood and a county and a citywide level to plug into. And then lastly, think about resources and networks, and think about the ecosystem and folks like Google and Facebook and MailChimp right here in our own city of Atlanta that are turning loose a lot of really, really powerful tools, right? Marketing tools. There's a great opportunity to do some paid advertising and SEO kind of placement as you test and pivot and reach customers that are kind of captive audiences today. So don't forget about those kind of resources, tools, partners, and people and mentors, because they're more important than ever. And the entrepreneurs that are most successful right now and kind of rethinking and reimagining are really leveraging these networks in addition to just the capital dollars from the government programs. Great, and I know what we talked about is a little bit on those networks are great, but what do you do kind of once you've tapped that network, and what are some of those practical things that you can start to launch as you truly pivot and think about doing business in new ways?
One of the things that I wanted to mention earlier, there's a lot out there, and pretty much also every organization, every nonprofit organization like the Metro Atlanta Chamber, Invest Atlanta, and so forth, they each have put out some amazing, COVID-19 resources. I would definitely recommend that all of you sort of like link up to them. There are some of them that are specific to our city, but there are many resources out there. Even investors have put out COVID-19 resources. I know investors like A16, and they have put out resources for from larger organizations that are looking sort of to keep their client base, which is startups and small businesses. One other thing is to be a little bit realistic, and I know we want to all be optimistic, etc. But of course, it's important also to grieve and breathe. We talked a little bit about that before the session in terms of how we cannot stick sort of to our best laid plans anymore. Unfortunately, that's a sad reality of things, and we want to kind of try to pause, and before we pivot into new plans. We want to make sure that we take a look at our hard data and look at oh, did I go out of?
Yeah, I don't know if we had a bit of a technical difficulty. I lost Amelia on my screen.
Am I back? Am I back, Brian?
Oh. Yeah, I can see you now. Again,
I think there's some, I apologize, there's some rain in my area and it kind of locked out. I don't know where I left off, but I was talking a little bit about how we're in a time, where we should, before we pivot and we make instinctual decisions about that, to truly take a look and sharpen the axe, right, before we start hitting with a new pivot and shifting into a new direction. There are a lot of really great resources. I mean, I looked at this article from from Deloitte that's talking about managing cash flow during a period of crisis. So we want to look at what concretely we can do to our current situation before we start shifting in a completely new direction. Again, accepting reality is going to be hard, but one of the truths is that we're probably going to be having a lower valuation for our company and probably be more accepting of, more owner dilution. One of the things that we might want to do is, again, taking a look again at who our customer base is. So Steve Blank just did a post recently on LinkedIn talking a little bit about how you can go about tapping into your customer base in a virtual setting, because we are used to sort of getting out of the building, obviously, and interviewing our real customers. There are ways that we can be creative about doing that during being all in lockdown, etc. There are also, many things like virtual accelerators that are popping out, left and right, and we might consider, tapping into those more virtual resources that are out there. And then at that point, I guess we can talk a little bit about how we move on to, once we've consolidated where we stand, how we move on to the next.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you've done right by your people, obviously you've sought help, and you've had that moment to kind of grieve, breathe, and reset. Now it's a perfect time for that reimagine period, right? So this is where that moment of true resilience, where that pivot and improvisation kind of kicks in. So I think that grieving piece is really important, right? And I think there's been a lot of really good articles about that and conversations. With so much of the uncertainty, so much of the disruption, I do feel like people are struggling with those best laid plans. People have invested so much of their time and their life and their money into their businesses, right? These are almost, children, they're babies that they've been working to nurture and grow. So I think that part of grieving is really important. In fact, at Start Me, we've actually started these virtual founder sessions where we have a licensed therapist, and I know this is happening around the country virtually as well. I've been hearing really good stories about that self-care element of this is really important part of being resilient. So not ignoring that and those feelings of grief, really recognizing those. And a lot of times, sometimes it's best to grieve that with other entrepreneurs. So kind of seek some of those things out, like the founder circles or other kind of groups online. I've heard a lot of really powerful stories from entrepreneurs in that place. So now once you're there and ready to reimagine, this is something that one of our Start Me mentors talks about. We have the luxury and really grateful to have, nearly 100 people that are working with businesses throughout the year in our Start Me program. And one of our mentors is actually a GBS alum named Carl Barham. And he was doing a great session last night. And Carl was talking about this pivot and improvise kind of phase is really, getting to work, getting back to work, right? It's hard. You got all these applications. You're cutting costs, but don't forget about the work and excelling kind of through this period. And so I think that's an important kind of thing to think about. And so once you reset and done that great analysis and talk to many of your customers and really understand, it's still the same as entrepreneurship before, right? Solving problems. Your problems may have shifted. Your value prop might be different, but there's still a lot of things that are fundamental that you shouldn't forget about. So moving from in-person to online, from dine-in to delivery, from, fashion and sewing for dresses to making masks. Those are some of the things that we've seen right here in Atlanta and a lot of the Start Me entrepreneurs we're working with. And one example is a baker, right? He was kind of at a farmer's market. It's called Bacon Jam. It's a husband and wife team, Josh and Debbie in South Atlanta. I think this is a great example, moving from the farmer's market to baking out of their home and setting up a really easy to use, simple website where they're shipping and delivering and leveraging a lot of different kind of resources and new tools by the Postal Service and other kind of delivery gig economy companies, and they're seeing tremendous growth. So I think there's that opportunity to kind of revisit, reimagine. And so also do think about, this isn't just your time to restore some of your revenue generation, but inherently this is where you're going to build really tight bonds and connections with your customers, right? This is that moment where you're solving their problems. Some of them are the same, some of them are totally new and different. But also we talked about purpose, right? And Amelia, you did a good job talking about those resilient people kind of reflect three things. And one of them is purpose and meaning. And this is a fantastic way to kind of reestablish your connection around meaning. Just because you're a for-profit startup or small business doesn't mean you have a tremendous social impact to the customers with your employees. So it's a way to kind of double down on meaning and purpose. And in many ways, I see a lot of small businesses delivering kind of value on a societal level on that front as well. So those are some of the ways that people are reimagining, pivoting, improvising. But there's also, it takes a village, right? Entrepreneurship is a team sport. So we wanted to kind of quickly talk about, for those that might be at a company or individuals or just as citizens, what can we do to support startups and small businesses in these kind of uncertain times? So I know we talked a bit about individuals, so I'll quickly jump in there and then look to maybe Amelia talk about companies. But think local and small first, right? I think that's a good kind of mentality. So making your purchases and being kind of intentional around that. Companies that aren't open today that you want to frequent and support, gift cards are a great kind of simple tool. Gifting to others right now, this is a great way to not just buy things for you, but loved ones and those that you want to know you're thinking about. And then, supporting crowd funds. There's a lot of great crowd funds out there for organizations, Kickstarters, things like that. Be an investor there. And then skill-based volunteerism. We know we have a lot of people in our business community that can provide a ton of help, right? It might not be frontline food distribution. If you're really good at accounting, Excel, digital marketing, website building, you name it, operations, we need your help, right? So there's great ways for you to be a mentor, advisor, putting your business skills to work. If you're here in Atlanta, there's a great way to do that through our Start Me program. I know there's a lot of great networks in the accelerator communities, Invest Atlanta, you name it, across the board to kind of get people plugged in and helping you find opportunities. And lastly, many of us are investors as individuals, right? As angel investors, as different friends and family kind of supporters and investors. So think about investing and think about, where are you going to put your dollars? What kind of businesses do you want to back, either through equity or debt, or even through crowdfunding kind of debt equity, debt tools like Kiva and Kiva USA. They're really cranking up their platforms, and it's a simple way that you could invest $25, $50, $100, $500 and actually be paid back over time. So those are some things that we can kind of rally as individuals. But I know if you're an employee at a big company, there's a lot of things you can do as well, or a major supplier that works with a lot of small businesses. So Amelia, tell us about that.
Yeah, and Brian, one other thing I wanted to mention is you talked about investing. One of our programs is actually coming up. It's called the Raise Forum, and we haven't closed doors. We have actually continued to keep it up because we know how important it is to continue providing those lines of investing to small businesses and startups. This is a program where we bring together investors from all over the Southeast and startups in the Southeast, and we're running that on May 15. So we will be running that again in the fall. So there are opportunities even coming from us as a business school to help small businesses get funded. If you're a large corporation, one of the things obviously to think about is think about new ways about procurement. Help small businesses and startups that you already are working with, advance by, update your terms to pay more quickly and so on. You can get creative really with partnerships and collaborations. I mean, some of the organizations that are most flexible and more agile are startups, and they are willing, to renegotiate. They're very creative, obviously, in terms of how they might provide, energy and new perspective to large corporations. So make sure you leverage them in a time, because effectively, as we were saying before, these are your customers. These smaller businesses, eventually, if they don't survive, they're not going to help you grow as a larger corporation. We think that's very important. And also, I think one of the things Brian also wanted to talk about, I don't know if we spoke about it, is there's a lot of people that are going out of business right now. There are students that are looking for internships and all that. So there's a lot of ways to creatively onboard people that are looking to reskill or to go out and try to keep, that line of growth in the business world. So even leveraging people that are right now unemployed, or students that might have lost, their internship or their job during the summer. Very important to look to hire them in different ways and very creative ways. I think one of the last things we wanted to talk about before we jump into Q&A, which I think we're probably a little bit over time, Brian, we want to talk a little bit about general citizens, right? And then maybe we can hop into Q&A.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us, obviously, we're in a democracy, and advocacy is really important, right? So there's obviously the individual, the things we can do on the company side, but advocacy is really important. And I know, the Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development authorities, those at the regional, state, and federal level, there's a lot of really important conversations, because obviously the startup community and our small business community is really, really critical to America and its economic success, but also I think a lot of our cultural identity, a lot of the vibrancy that we take pride in, is not only our big community, our big kind of Fortune 500s. Really proud of those. It's really a yes and approach. We need them to thrive, but we also need lots and lots of small and startups. So being an advocate is really valuable. So pushing for more emergency stimulus as that kind of comes about is going to be important, kind of telling that story and why that matters, even if you're not directly running a small business or a startup. And even kind of pushing for set-asides and prioritization, right? In the longer term recovery, obviously there's this emergency phase, but we know this is going to pull into 2021, 2022. This is going to be a pretty long recovery kind of period. So just being continual advocates around some of that recovery work that's there. We really want to make sure that startups and small businesses have a seat at that table, and the kind of organizations that support them, have the appropriate funding, because it's not just the capital and emergency needs, but it's also that broader kind of framework around technical assistance, around set-asides, and kind of, if there's roles for these small businesses and startups in some of the rebuilding efforts and some of the infrastructure and some of the recovery, that'll be important as well. So be an advocate, in addition to some of the things you can do as an individual, in local and small, and some of the things you can do on your corporate job in that hat. So
Yeah.
with that, we kind of wanted to kind of look at the feed and address some of the questions that came up, but thank you for engaging in the conversation about resilience and the key role it's playing with our startups and small businesses out there.
Yeah, thank you. And please do feel free to post some questions. We'll take a peek. We're going to be tag teaming in answering some of the questions. Brian, one of the questions that I quickly peeked at was, what are the startups that are doing well in this climate and this economy? And one of the things, I mean, we've seen some examples even coming out of our, our own population and community of startups. One of our alumni, which is also a doctor on the field, Angelo Fusaro of Physicians 360, kind of was creating devices and diagnostic kits before the crisis for things like strep throat, UTI, etc. And as the crisis came in, saw the need and pivoted towards more consultations and telehealth, and is doing paid services for the community. So that, to me, is an example of somebody that takes a look at what is the market asking for, and that I can provide in a different way from where I was going before. And so kind of repivoting to the needs of the current market. And there's many wonderful examples of people that have taken that and sort of turned prices on their head. Some particular industries are doing better than others. Logistics and delivery, obviously, we see how that market is doing. People that are delivering door to door and things like that are definitely doing much better. Obviously, communication and content and cloud are industries that are becoming a little bit stronger during this crisis. So look for where the need is, I think, and try to find where you might reshift in that direction into where everybody's kind of going in terms of needs, right, Brian? I'm sure you're seeing similar scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of challenge, but there's a lot of pivots that are really successful. I mentioned Bacon Jam and just how they're operating as a bakery in South Atlanta. That's been a great story. Another one is a company called Moisture Love that graduated our program, founded by Janelle Darden. Janelle's done an excellent opportunity just kind of meeting customers. A lot of her customers usually access her hair care products that she makes through salons. Those salons are closed. So she's been really out there on Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook, actually talking to her customers, doing tutorials, hair tips. Influencers are joining her, and it's really, really taken shape. She's actually had a 700% growth in sales She went from, $300, $300 a day and selling through Amazon and other kind of B2C channels and salons direct to the customer and seeing 700%, sales growth. And you mentioned kind of that personal assistant and virtual kind of thing, and those efforts. We have a company that came out of our Eastlake program in the city of Atlanta called My Panda, and that's been fantastic. It started off as kind of an alternative to some of the other kind of personal assistance tools, and it relies heavily locally on your neighbors and the trust factor of them doing kind of personal tasks on your behalf. And so My Panda's downloads are through the roof, and they're doing a lot of grocery shopping, but also providing a lot of really important social services for senior citizens in the community as well. So My Panda and Moisture Love and Bacon Jam are three ones that we've been working with that are really taking this and growing their revenue, but growing, I think, their brand recognition and trust in the community in big ways.
Yeah, and I wanted to also add one more thing. I know we talked about the investors potentially being in a freezing space right now, but one of the encouraging things we've seen, one of our alumnus, Michael Cohn, actually just kick off his VC right now, Overline VC, and they're actually accepting pitches right now. So we are seeing that investors are looking at smarter ways or different ways, or sort of preparing for the next wave, of investing. So that line has not completely dried up. There is, some dry powder, as they call it in the market, out there that is actually accessible and available. Some of the questions that I also see here, Brian, some people are asking what kind of services do our departments offer to alumnus. So a lot of things. So I guess we could talk probably for hours about the kind of services we might provide to entrepreneurs and small businesses. And it's not just in normal times. So we're here, to support our alumnus and, and also other people in the ecosystem. We have, an accelerator that's open pretty much to all of our community, and actually applications are open right now. We're going to be running that in the fall. That's the Emory Startup Launch Accelerator, and applications are open for pretty much anybody in our community. So students, alumni, staff, faculty, etc. We do offer a number of different sort of consults to obviously the people that are in our community. We're connected in the ecosystem. Both Brian and I participate very actively in the community with a number of different nonprofits and organizations, so we can create a lot of connections with incubators, accelerators. We actually partner with groups like, the Atlanta Tech Village and many other partners. We do apprenticeships for our students in places like Techstars, etc. So there's many options, and you can reach out to both Brian and I. I mean, one easy way, you could email us at entrepreneurship.emory.edu, and we will triage that, need sort of as it comes about.
Yeah, and just a couple of other resources available. Our Start Me program is a 14-week program that runs every January through May. So we're graduating our newest group actually next week, our newest 49 entrepreneurs. So we don't have another program starting for some time, but there's still a lot of resources that we actively put out there. We have a resource tab on our website at startmeatl.org. So whether you're right here in Atlanta or anywhere in the country, we have a lot of information, templates, tools, online learning, it just based on more of our traditional kind of work. But we also have a COVID-19 special kind of section that just includes lots of different kind of resources, information on the PPP and EIDL programs that I mentioned. But also there's a lot of energy from the private sector in philanthropic support for small businesses out there. So we're continuously updating that page. So that's a great resource tool. I know some folks have asked about our founder circle on the chat. So that's actually a closed kind of group for Start Me entrepreneurs only. So you have to be one of our 300 graduates to access it. But there are other kind of groups out there. Carl Barnum, one of our mentors, he actually has a Facebook group that he's leveraging kind of similar tactics. It's called Growth Experts. So GROWTH and experts with an X, XPERTS, a private Facebook group here in Atlanta that have a lot of people trading kind of stories, kind of peers, collaborating, fellow entrepreneurs. So that's a great group that brings a lot of that same mentality that you find in founder circles. But I do know there's various kind of founder circles kind of launching virtually, both here in Atlanta and around the country. So kind of check those out in your area and plug into them. They're really powerful at this point.
And Brian, I know another question that came up, a few people had talked about how do we access, our career management center. There is a lot of opportunity. As we said, there are students that range from, undergrads to MBA students that have, 5 to 8 years of experience in previous companies. And so we'd love to hear from you if you are a business that's looking, obviously, to hire or even just to look at onboard some interns for the summer. So this is it's a great time to find some amazing talent out there. So definitely reach out to us if that is something that you're looking to do now.
Yeah, I've been talking to a lot of students, Amelia. I know a lot of them are passionate about startups, small businesses. Many of them have had changes in plans, to be honest, right? With internships or full-time offers that have been pushed back. So we do have a lot of talented students that would love to roll up their sleeves and get to work. And I know our Career Management Center actually set up a special email address for projects and internships kind of outside some of the typical recruiting that we do throughout the year. So just mbacmc@emory.edu. They're monitoring that box closely. Please propose opportunities, obviously stipend and paid roles, but also, if there's really interesting, cool opportunities that provide, some huge impact, but also more importantly, great experiences for our students and their careers. I know they're open to, pro bono opportunities where students can
and some of the other things that we do ongoing throughout the normal year, but also just in general, even now, Brian, is we work closely with small businesses and companies on projects. So if they're looking to have a specific project addressed, like a competitive analysis or a market research or a growth analysis and whatnot of their product and service on the market, we work closely, almost in consulting basis. So we do it both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. So it is something that as a business school, we love to collaborate with the real businesses out there to try to define what their current problem is, almost like in a consulting approach, and support small businesses in solving their current problems. So definitely that's another thing that we do, both as formalized programs. One of it is our capstone program called Impact, but also as part of our entrepreneurship practicum classroom course, in which we work specifically with startups in the classroom with students. So I don't see any more questions. But this has been a really fun discussion. And, we've enjoyed having anybody that's been here on the call with us. We look forward to you reaching out. If, of course, you can, as we mentioned, ask us any questions after the call. It's been a lot of fun to have this conversation. Resilience is obviously a key topic these days for all of us as individuals, as businesses, as a part of the community. There's lots of things we can do to support each other to continue on as the crisis unfolds.
Yeah, no, it's a great conversation. I love all the questions and engagement and ways that we can all help each other be resilient together, right? This is one of those unprecedented situations. It's an only everyone effort, and so just being thoughtful and things we can do as individuals, as employees at companies and citizens out there. I think there's a lot of ways that we can put our skills to work and help one another. So glad that we can help to kind of facilitate that, and look forward to continuing the conversation. And we'll kind of get some more links and things out there as we repost this recording later on. But thank you so much for joining us. We had a great time.
Thank you, everyone.